when true magic, while still uncommon, was not as rare as it is today, there lived a man who was also a crocodile. He did not begin his life as this duality of creatures. He was born, and as such not hatched, as a boy named Manny Fishmine. And he grew to manhood in a singularly human state. Manny married. Though the home he and his wife, Elizabeth, shared was poor, they were happy with what they had. Many adored Elizabeth. In the early summer when the bog tubers grew, Manny would spend his days traveling to the foul-smelling, sulfurous swamp to collect them. Avoiding the crocodiles that lived there, Manny would collect as many bog tubers as he could carry and bring them home. Though Manny never cared for the flipper, he knew how fond his dear wife was of them, and the sacrifice of travel and stench was as nothing compared to her smile. Soon Elizabeth became round with child, and Manny was jubilant. Then came the day that the child was born. Well, the baby boy, Larry, was healthy and strong. His mother did not survive the day. Manny was in despair. He had lost the great love of his heart. Now, left alone to raise a child he knew not how, he made a rash decision. Leaving Larry with the midwife, Manny left the village bound for a sulfurous swamp. But this time, he was after no bog tubers. He had heard that there were many underhanded merchants who traded illegally in crocodile pelts, and that good money could be had for them. And though it was not within the limits of the law, Manny saw that if he could hunt a crocodile, he could make enough money to care for his son. Trudging through the deep mud, Manny tracked his prey. At last, as the sun was kissing the horizon on its downhill climb, he found a large mottled crocodile. Though nervous, Manny's hands were steady as he took aim with his crossbow and fired. The bullet flew true, but then, just before striking the beast, it stopped, hanging in the air. Manny was filled with fear, but either because of his terror or because of an unrecognized magic, he found his legs unwilling to accept any command to move. The crocodile that would have been the target rose out of the water. It seemed to stand upright on only its hind legs. A shimmer around the beast made it difficult to see exactly what was happening, but within the glow, the body was transforming from a crocodile into a gnarled old woman. Her skin was brown with mottled green patches, much as it had been as a crocodile, and her eyes remained those of the reptile she had been only moments before. Manny recognized her at once from the many legends he had heard growing up. This was Mama Herpada, guardian of the sulfur swamp. She turned her inhuman eyes on the hunter.
Manny Fishmine, she crowed. You were put to Crocodile in the sacred waters of the sulfur swamp.
Manny stammered, tried to respond, unable to think clearly.
I'm sorry. I have a son.
Mama Herpada nodded.
Yes, a newborn son.
How did she know? Was Mama Herpada all-seeing? Then, with nothing more than a turn of her wrist, the baby appeared there in the swamp. Larry floated in the air inches from Mama Herpada's hands, wrapped in a blanket and sleeping peacefully.
Please!
Manny pleaded.
Don't hurt him. I'll do anything.
Is not I came with indifference to make the innocent life in a sacred place,
she said. Then she stroked her chin thoughtfully.
Manny Fishmine,
she continued.
For many generations I have protected these waters, but now I am more than I am tired of. I need of time to refresh and be reborn. In that time I will need another to watch over the sulfurous swamp. The other will be you.
With a quick nod of her head, a streak of green soared from her eyes and into Manny's chest. He grunted in surprise, but felt no pain.
What did you do?
He asked.
I have given you a piece of my power. Dive into the water, and you shall become a crocodile. Return to the land as you rise, you will return to being a man. You shall live here in the sulphurous swamp, here with your boy. You will protect the crocodiles from the poachers, such as yourself, while I regain my youth and my energy. I will replenish in time of the 234th full moon. If in that time you can protect the crocodiles of the swamp from all who would kill them, I will set you free, a man once more. But should you fail, should a single one of my sacred stock be taken by a human, you shall become a crocodile for all your days, and your son shall suffer your curse as well.
With that, the old woman was gone, and the baby drifted down into his father's arms. And so Manny built a small shack in the deepest part of the swamp. And there he raised his son, but never told the boy the truth about why they lived in the swamp. Nor did Larry know that his father, when immersed in water, became a crocodile. Larry grew, and being a brave and energetic lad, he explored the sulphurous swamp. He knew its paths and ways. This wasn't to say he never found trouble. Often, Manny would watch the boy hidden in the water in his crocodile form. One day, when Larry had lived for 91 full moons, he was making his way toward the bubbling pool when a misstep sent him sprawling into the thick muck, and he was unable to rise. The lad was amazed when a crocodile came out and offered its tail to pull him free. That night, Larry told his father about a crocodile he had often noticed following him. So the lad had noticed Manny. But when Larry added that the crocodile had saved him that day, Manny was confused. He had not done anything like Larry had said. Could there be another crocodile that was following his son? For 233 full moons, Manny and Larry went on living this way. Poachers were rare after the tale spread about Manny fish find going to Sulphur's swamp and never returning, and what's more, his son disappearing from the midwife's arms. However, there were some few who dared to enter the swamp with intents to kill a crocodile. But Manny, with the strength and abilities of crocodile and the guile of a man, was able to lay traps for these poachers and discourage them to such an extent that they never held their purpose for long. And then it was in the last month of Manny's exile that the first true danger came. Her name was Beulah Sharp. She came from the big city, and tales of disappearing poachers were nonsense in her mind. Along with her teenage daughter, Trina, Beulah moved into a small home on the outskirts of the sulphurous swamp. In the beginning, the reasons for doing so were not clear, but in her heart, she knew what she wanted. She wanted the pelts of the crocodiles. She wanted to make a fortune by selling that which was so rare and hard to find that there were some who would pay very richly for it. But in those first days of the shark's residence at the edge of the swamp, there were no weapons seen. Instead, Beulah and Trina would take forays into the swamp exploring. It was on one such exploration that Trina became separated from her mother. Manny, in his reptilian form, was watching Beulah, trying to ascertain her true purpose. Trina, lost, began to pant and run hither and thither. But she found some help, not in the form of her mother, but in the form of a handsome young man. He introduced himself as Larry, and he knew all the pathways through the swamp. For Trina, the meeting was fortuitous, but for Larry it was much more. He had never before met any human but his father, and certainly never a girl. He was enraptured. Larry led Trina back to her home, and here he met her mother. Beulah recognized at once that this lad would be an asset in their quest to find crocodiles. After all, he knew the swamp and all its pathways, and so she encouraged Trina's interest in the strange animal. Manny was also aware that Larry had found his way into the company of other humans, but not yet sure why Beulah and Trina had come. The Crocodile Man was uncertain whether or not Larry's association with them would be harmful or helpful. He would just have to wait to see what would come of it. That night, back at their shack, Larry told his father of the great surprise of the day. People. He had met other people in the swamp. Of course, Manny was already aware of this, but he shared in his son's sense of wonder about it. He encouraged Larry to see them again, learn more about them and their ways. Larry agreed.
Father, this is the most incredible thing I have ever seen. Even stranger than Tuber Eater.
Manny replied,
Tuber eater? What's that?
It's what I call the crocodile, the one that follows me.
Why do you call it tuber eater?
Because in the summer I always see it eating the bog tubers.
Manny was struck silent for a moment. Bog tubers brought back memories, wonderful and painful. Finally, he said,
Crocodiles don't eat bog tubers.
I know.
Larry agreed.
That's why I've always considered it the strangest thing I have ever seen. That is, until today.
Larry went to bed, but Manny was unable to sleep. Restlessly, he pondered on the two great mysteries he had to uncover. This crocodile following his son, why would a crocodile do so? And what kind of crocodile would eat bog tubers? Could it be? Impossible. And what was Manny to do about this woman? Larry had called her Beulah. And what about Trina, the woman's daughter? Were they a threat? If so, to whom? To the crocodiles of the Sulphur Swamp? To Larry? That night, as Manny lay in bed in solemnity, he heard the lashings of a furious storm against the sides of his shack. BAM! It sounded unlike any other he had known in the many moons in the Sulphur Swamp. And the next morning, he could see the effects of the storm everywhere. Many of the paths he had known were flooded. Some of the mangroves were down. Fish had been somehow blown from the waters, and they lay dead on the land beyond. It was one more puzzle for his overtaxed mind. Was it the random chance of nature? No storm with such force had ever been seen in these parts before. Why was it coming now? Did it relate to the arrival of Beulah Shark? Why was it at a time so near to the end of his sentence as the guardian of this place? The storm had also laid waste on Beulah's plans for the day. She had intended to exploit Larry's knowledge of the swamp to find the best grounds for hunting the crocodiles, but without ever letting on to the boy. But due to the floodwaters, Larry was greatly delayed in seeking out Trina and Beulah. He had to find new paths, and it made it difficult for him to show much of the swamp to the two women, because of many of the ways through the swamp he had always known were temporarily inaccessible. Still, in the limited wanderings of the day, the trio did come across one crocodile. Larry told Trina and Beulah that this was Tuber Eater. He described how this reptile had saved him once and frequently followed him protectively. Trina could sense the affection Larry felt for Tuber Eater and by extension for all the crocodiles of the Sulphur Swamp. She began to feel some affinity toward them as well, that was likely due to the affinity she felt for the lad. Still, Trina began to doubt the wisdom of her mother's plan to poach these beasts. And so it was that Manny was not the only one who lay unsleeping that night. Inside Trina, a doubt raged against her belief that her mother knew best. And a new passion was growing as well, though she didn't yet recognize what it signified. For children rarely know when the first loves are sprouting from the seeds within, but the fruit is that such seeds will bear. Like Trina, Manny lay awake, but for him it was the second night in a row. Again, the storm raged outside. This time of a greater fury than the first. Manny arose and went to the door to look out. Did he see light in the distance? Almost as though at the center of the storm's area, there were two glowing crocodile eyes. What did it all portend? Was it a coincidence that these storms began just before the 234th full moon, but tomorrow, at long last, would announce the arrival of a renewed Mama Herpada beneath a full moon. Tomorrow, Manny's years of exile in the swamp could finally come to an end. Only one more day. Surely nothing could go wrong in just one more day. But in that, the crocodile man was dead wrong. The next morning dawned with an unwelcome and unnatural frigidity for the time of the year. Manny knew this kind of temperature would slow the crocodiles of the swamp and also slow himself when in his reptilian form. But he vowed to be even more vigilant than usual. He would not let harm come to a crocodile on this, the last day of his enforced role as their protector. As Larry headed off to see Trina, Manny lowered himself into the cold water and experienced once again the sensation of scales forming along his skin. Though the morning was cold at the home of Beulah Sharp, things were getting heated indeed. After her restless night, Trina steeled herself to stand up to her mother. She told Beulah that poaching Larry's beloved crocodiles would be wrong. The matriarch did not like to be questioned and did not like to be told she was wrong, and certainly did not like to see any hitch that might send her plans awry. Were Trina to tell Larry the truth about Beulah's intentions, she would lose her valuable guide. So while she stewed with ire inside, outwardly she claimed to see the wisdom of the girl's words. She promised to walk with Trina and Larry that day and try to see the crocodiles as Larry saw them. Beulah wrapped herself in a large cloak against the cold of the day. But while Trina herself was dressing, Beulah tucked her hand crossbow into the cloak where it would not be seen. Larry made straight for Trina's home, but Manny, unable to take the waterways, beat his son to the locale, even slowed by the cold. Manny used his intelligence to find the places to watch Beulah and Trina without being seen himself. When Larry arrived, he led the two women into the swamp. None of them knew they were being followed. Throughout the morning hours, they saw no fauna of the swamp. The sudden cold had been inhibited on the lively insect colonies from enjoying the day. But time went on, and soon the sun, unable to breach the chill of the day, reached the zenith. It was then that Larry spotted the one animal he best recognized in all the surfless swamp. It was Tuber Eater, and once again he pointed the crocodile out to his companions. Exactly what drove Beulah to her decision in that moment is difficult to guess. Perhaps she was enraged or jealous at the look of adoration in the eyes of her daughter. Perhaps she feared that this may be her only chance to encounter a crocodile that day. Or perhaps she was moved by a spirit that was not her own. Whatever the reason, the result was of greater importance. Without warning, the woman drew the hand crossbow out of her cloak. Before Larry or Trina could even fully understand what was happening, Beulah took aim. But where Larry and Trina were slow to react, Manny, watching from under the waters nearby, was not. In spite of the chill that slowed his reptilian blood, he sprang. As the bolt of the crossbow flew into the open air, so did the crocodile man fly up from the water. The bolt streamed in a straight path toward the eye of the tuber eater. Had nothing interfered with his progress, it would have been undoubtedly found its target. But just like Manny's crossbow bolt of so many years previous, this one was also blocked from its destination. Unlike Manny's shot, though, it was not halted by magic. This bolt was blocked by Crocodile Man's own body coming into its path. The razor tip of the weapon pierced into the crocodile's chest. The leaping beast landed with a crash on the dry patch just in front of Tuber Eater. Though Larry had not been as quick to react as his father, he now took action. He quickly disarmed Beulah, and in her shock at the appearance of another crocodile, she put up no fight. Trina turned to her mother, her eyes filled with hurt and horror. But that horror was nothing compared to that to come. from Larry, Trina and Beulah turned to look at that upon which he was gazing. The wounded crocodile, it was changing. On its arms and legs, scales were fading away, becoming soft skin, and its body was shrinking, and the tail disappearing completely. The minutes went by, and the three onlookers could do naught but stare, at least until the face became recognizable.
Father!
Larry shouted. He ran toward his sire and cradled Manny's body in his arms.
Father!
But Manny's eyes, already clouding over, looking past the boy into the blue sky on the eastern horizon. And there, faint, hard to see from the sunlight that filled the day, but visible, he saw it.
The moon!
He gasped.
The final moon!
At that moment, as Larry looked back at the full moon just rising over the horizon, from out of the waters arose a woman. She was dark, young, powerful, and beautiful, except for her eyes. She had the eyes of a crocodile.
Mama hurt us.
Beulah breathed. The dark, mottled woman approached, her step taking her over water if it were land. She strode with confidence, arrogance, and power until she laid eyes on Manny.
No,
She whispered,
no, it can't be. Mama Herpada?
Larry demanded.
Save him. Save my father.
The lad had heard the legend from his father, and until now had never believed them. But now confronted by the reality of her, he could only beg for his father's life.
No!
Mama Herpada screamed. Manny could barely speak, but he croaked out the words.
I have done my task. Free my boy!
No!
The woman with crocodile eyes screamed, but not in response to Manny's words. She was staring beyond Manny at where the crocodile, sometimes known as Tuber Eater, had crawled up behind the dying man. Tuber Eater put her large, triangular head on Manny's chest and cried. Yes, tears flowed from the crocodile's eyes. They dripped from its eyes and fell to its wounded skin.
It cannot be!
The bell from Mama Herpada filled the air, echoing from all directions. At that moment, the winds arose in a storm that made the previous two nighttime storms seem like mere drizzles. Larry felt as though the very breath was drained from his chest. Trina's ears were filled with a tempest of such magnitude, she dropped to her knees with dizziness. And Beulah was lifted from the ground and flung deep into the swamp. The raging wind lasted only a minute, perhaps two, and in that time no sounds could be uttered, nor thoughts considered. Those present knew only pain and fear. But then, as suddenly as they emerged from each other, the winds withered into calm. Trina rose. Larry opened his eyes, and both of them had the greatest surprises of their lives. For there, where Manny Fishbag had been lying, approaching the threshold of the death, there now lay a man a little older than Larry himself. He looked like Manny, but young, and more importantly, the wound in his chest was gone. But more shocking still, there was no longer a crocodile shedding tears on the mirror. In its place, there was a beautiful young woman who Larry had never before seen, or not to his memory. She was crying and holding the young Manny Fishbone. Manny's arms enfolded her and lifted her face so she could look into her eyes.
Elizabeth?
He asked, shock plain on his face. She looked at him and saw that he was young and unwounded. Manny? And they embraced. For many a moment, nothing was spoken. Larry held Trina as he waited for an explanation that was not quick in coming. The two others, Manny and Elizabeth, could do nothing but hold each other in rapture. At last they broke their embrace. Each was eager to share with the other, to ask questions of the other. But first, Manny introduced Larry to his mother. How was she alive? Elizabeth explained that just after Larry had been born, as a midwife truly Mama Herpata in disguise had stolen Elizabeth's life as a woman. She had just observed it, and all went black. When Elizabeth awoke, she was no longer a woman, but a crocodile. Mama Herpata had needed the essence of a young and a healthy woman to begin her rebirth, and so she had stolen it when Elizabeth, having just given birth, was too weak to fight that power. But Mama Herpata's ability to be reborn and her control over the destinies of human lives could not be overcome one thing: true heroic sacrifice for love. Manny had willingly sacrificed himself to save Larry from a lifetime as a crocodile. And when Mama Herpata saw that Manny was about to die, the life energy within her could no longer be contained. It was unleashed in a storm which renewed youth and full humanity to Manny and Elizabeth. Knowing the swamp as they did, Manny and Larry led the search for Beulah, but she was never found. And while Trina was sad at the loss of her mother, she was welcomed into her new family, a family that was now complete and reborn through the power of love.